What's up, everybody? We are back here on Unpacking the Backpack. I enjoyed the solitude and the very nice microphone in my home office, but I am back on the road, so that means I have to navigate hotel sounds. And hopefully, we won't get any odd sounds as we are talking today. So, what do I want to talk about? I want to talk about the power of the bookends. Opening and closing lessons with research-based pedagogy. Are you excited? I hope so. You know, think about, when you're attending a training, when you watch a movie or read a book. What do you remember the most? The beginning and the end. Our brains are wired for this. It's called the serial position effect, and it has two components. The primary effect, remember the first things, and the recency effect. We remember the last things. In the classroom, this means the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of lessons are the most valuable instructional and pedagogical real estate. These are your bookends. And what I plan to do is kind of like explore research-based strategies to make these moments count, ensuring maximum retention and the transfer of learning. Are you ready? Are you with me? Let's get started. Before we jump into the how, let's anchor ourselves in the why. Why are the bookends so critical? It all comes down to cognitive science. I mentioned previously the serial position effect, and this dictates that the human brain prioritizes information received at the start and end of a learning sequence. We must capitalize on this natural tendency. Secondly, the opening, our hook, is essential for activating prior knowledge. Research consistently shows that new information is best retained when it can be successfully linked to existing schema. An effective opener acts as a bridge. Third, the closing, the wrap up, the exit ticket is where metacognition and consolidation occur. According to John Hattie's extensive meta-analysis on visible learning, metacognitive strategies where students think about their own thinking have a high effect size of around 0.7. A powerful closing forces students to process, summarize, and apply what they've learned, moving information from working memory into long-term memory. Bookend pedagogy, it isn't just a nice way to start and finish. It's a necessary structure for optimizing the brain's natural learning processes. So now let's focus on the first bookend, the opening. This phase should achieve three things in the first 5 to 10 minutes. It should capture attention, activate prior knowledge, and clearly state the learning outcome. Whether you call it objective, target, does not matter to me. But that comes from the unpacked standard. Forget the administrative preamble. Your hook needs to be immediate and relevant. Think about the provocation. Start with a challenging question, a paradox, or a surprising statistic related to the lesson's topic. For a history lesson on the Industrial Revolution, you might start with, today, your phone is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the Apollo 11 computer. But what was the single greatest technological leap for the average person living in 1850? This creates a knowledge gap the lesson will fill. The current event connection. Link the academic concept to something happening in the news, on social media, or in popular culture. This boosts relevance, a key driver of intrinsic motivation. And the visual auditory anchor. Use a short, powerful image, a compelling 30-second video clip, or a piece of music to set the mood and introduce the theme. Capturing attention, setting the hook, that's something I try to do every time I present, whether it's a keynote, workshop, presentation. So if you're an administrator, think about how you also employ a hook during your faculty meetings. Next, activating prior knowledge. This is the bridge building stage. Students need to retrieve what they already know. So, some strategies. Think, pair, share on a concept. Give a prompt related to the prerequisite knowledge, such as, what is the smallest unit of matter you remember learning about? Students think alone, discuss with a partner, and then share out, preferably using individual whiteboards. This low-stakes retrieval practice is essential, but go further. Think, pair, share questions that connect to the types of questions and problems your students will see on their standardized tests. Next, the 2-minute knowledge dump. Give students 2 minutes to write down everything they know about the topic in a quick brainstorm. This externalizes prior knowledge and makes it accessible for the new learning. Another strategy, question box review. Have students anonymously submit one question from the previous lesson to a box. The opening then involves quickly addressing a few of these questions. This is an excellent form of self-assessment. So we got the hook, activating prior knowledge. Next, establish clear learning goals. This part is non-negotiable. Research by Robert Marzano on effective instruction stresses the importance of clear goals. The I can statement. Don't just list the standard. Translate it in a student-friendly language. Instead of analyze the causes of the Civil War, use I can explain 3 primary causes of the Civil War and defend which one was the most significant. Success criteria. Briefly state how the student will know they have successfully met the goal. For example, you'll know you're successful if your final explanation uses evidence from at least 2 primary source documents. A strong opening moves the learner from passive attendee to active investigator, ready to tackle the core concept. Next, let's talk about the closing. The closing and the recency, consolidation, and transfer. So with the closing, this should happen in the last 5 or 10 minutes of a lesson and must focus on 3 things: summarization, retrieval practice, and forward-thinking transfer. So when we think about summarization and consolidation, the closing is not for packing up or dismissal. It's for hard wiring the learning. So here's some strategies. 1, the 3-2-1 summary. Classic closing strategies. Students write down 3 key concepts they learned today, 2 things they are still confused about, metacognition in action, everybody, and 1 way this lesson connects to the previous one for the real world. This provides invaluable feedback to the teacher and prompts student reflection. Another strategy, the minute paper exit ticket. I love exit tickets. A single high leverage question that forces synthesis. Example, in 1 sentence, argue for the most important consequence of the event we discussed today. It requires students to distill the entire lesson into its core essence. But you can go further. You can use artificial intelligence as part of activating prior knowledge or the exit ticket and say, create 3 scaffolded, easy, moderate, challenging questions based on what 3rd grade students will see on this standardized test. Or you can align it to the standard. Bam, easy. Why multiple choice? Scaffolded, because again, you get that in quickly, you get that information, feedback. Another strategy, teach it back. Have a student or a pair of students stand up and attempt to teach the main concept of the lesson back to the rest of the class. The act of teaching is one of the most effective ways to consolidate one's own understanding. And maybe not teach it the rest of the class. Maybe they just try to teach it to a peer. So we got summarization, consolidation. Next, retrieval practice for long-term memory. This moves the learning from short-term to long-term memory. We want to make the brain work a little bit. So, some strategies. The interleaved question. Instead of asking about only today's content, throw in a question from a unit 2 weeks ago. For example, today we studied photosynthesis. How is this process fundamentally different from the process of cellular respiration, which we studied last week? This interleaving of topics significantly improves long-term retention. The brain dump concept map. Without notes, students must sketch out the main concepts of the day and show the relationships between them. This visually represents their current understanding. We also want to focus on the transfer and forward thinking. A powerful closing connects today's learning to tomorrow's application. So, strategies. You could use a prediction ticket. Ask students to make an educated guess about where the topic is going next. For example, based on the character's choice today, predict what disaster awaits him or her in the next chapter. This creates anticipatory interest for the next lesson. Another strategy, the real-world application prompt. Find one example of the concept we explored today in the news tonight, at home, or on social media. Be prepared to share it tomorrow. This promotes the transfer of knowledge outside the classroom walls. You could also use the homework bridge. Ensure any assigned homework is a direct, targeted extension of the day's learning, not just busy work. It should be the first step forward, achieving the next I can statement. Everybody, the closing should never be rushed. It is the final opportunity to ensure students walk out the door having successfully captured the most critical information of the day. But the key is, everyone, we got to plan for it. Consistency, continuity. And we got to plan for it in a way when we implement it, it really provides feedback and insights, because the closing could potentially necessitate a reteach the next day, or how you're going to review prior learning. So it all comes down to application and fidelity. How do we make it stick? So how do we integrate this bookend pedagogy with fidelity? It requires planning. Something I just mentioned. When mapping out your plan, intentionally budget 5 to 10 minutes for the opener and 5 to 10 minutes for the closer. Don't let the core content squeeze these out. The core content is important, but without a strong launch and landing, much of the time spent in the middle is wasted. And listen, I teach phys ed, I teach art. You can still do an opener, but maybe your closer is done in the learning management system, Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom, where they're doing a core reflection on what they learned about. Another key, everybody, start small. Commit to using one new opening strategy for a week and one new closing strategy the following week. Collect data. Observe student engagement during the bookends to note the quality of their responses on the exit tickets. You will quickly see how intentional planning of these instructional moments elevates the overall learning experience. It turns a lesson plan into a cohesive, memorable journey. As I mentioned earlier, this isn't just for teachers. If you are an administrator listening to this, it is so important for you to model during faculty meetings, email blasts, professional learning, and call out, hey everybody, here was my hook. Here's how I activated prior knowledge. Here's how I closed. Because we can't ask others to do what we are not willing to do or have not done ourselves. And that is pivotal. Don't just dictate, show. So we covered, at least in my opinion, a lot today, just in terms of how we open and close learning experiences. So the two takeaways that I hope, at least in my opinion, are of utmost value. Number one, primacy and recency. Your opening and closing are the most memorable parts of the lesson, a meeting, a PD, due to the serial position effect. Number two, function over time. The opening must activate and hook. The closing must consolidate and transfer. By dedicating time and intention to these critical bookends, you move from simply covering content to ensuring students actually retain and can use the knowledge. As always, everybody, I really, really appreciate you tuning in to my raw, unfiltered, and unedited podcast. When we think about lessons, we think about plans and PD. Listen, everybody, we might have our stuff there, but we fumble our words. We don't have opening and closing music. I mean, that's all great. And we don't edit what we do, although I edit some of my PowerPoints in real time. So that's one of the reasons why I just do this raw and try to kind of make it like, hey, when we're in a classroom or we're facilitating a meeting. Also, I cited some research today, and I will tell you, I talk extensively about bookend pedagogy, both in disruptive thinking in our classrooms and personalize. Both books you can find on Amazon. Everybody, as always, keep making a difference in the lives of students and the people that you serve.